Hi everyone! Welcome to the Inclusive Access tutorial series for Microsoft Word. My name is Keisha and I'll be your host as we look at this episode's topic in document accessibility. In this episode, we're going to examine the use of fonts, font sizes, and line spacing for your document, and why certain fonts and font sizes aren't considered accessible and aren't recommended. Fonts are probably the most important element of any text-based document, and the fonts that you choose will greatly influence your document's accessibility. To break things down, we'll talk about font selections first, then font sizing, and then line spacing to increase your document's overall accessibility. So let's get started. Fonts are most generally organized into two major categories: serif fonts and sans serif fonts. Serif fonts can be considered your most traditional font style. For example, Times New Roman is a serif font. Serif fonts are distinctive because the ends of the strokes for each letter have decorative tails, which are reminiscent of a typewriter font. It's a classic font style that has been used for decades. Sans serif fonts, on the other hand, can be viewed as the more modern font style. The decorative tails on the ends of the letters are gone, and the letter style is very close to handwritten printed letters. So which of these fonts are considered more accessible? Well, based on WCAG guidelines, sans serif fonts are considered the more accessible choice. Why? Well, that's probably because of the non-traditional letter designs that are often found within serif sets. For example, many serif sets have a non-traditional letter design for the letter G, which can cause reading attribution errors when someone tries to read your text. This is less common in sans serif fonts because they tend to stick so closely to hand-printed letter design. Overall, sans serif fonts are recommended for accessibility over the other font styles. But from the selection of sans serif fonts that you will come across, there are many subcategories like decorative or plain sans serif fonts. And it's because of these variations within the sans serif font family that the Canadian National Institute for the Blind have narrowed down your list from hundreds to just two. The two fonts that are considered the most accessible within the sans serif font family are Arial and Verdana. Choosing between these two comes down to a matter of preference. Both of the fonts that the CNIB have chosen are relatively common and often used. Just like there's a lot of discussion surrounding which font is accessible, I've had a lot of questions about what I recommend for accessible font sizes. Well, my answer to that is that it depends on what you're working on. And it is a bit easier for me to give recommendations on this because there are set guidelines for print documents and web content. So when I say it depends on whether you're working with print or if you're working on the web. For example, print documents have set point sizes that they recommend for their fonts, whereas on the web, there is a scaling structure that you need to follow. Font sizes for print documents are measured in point size, and for regular or standard print documents, your body text must be at least 12 point in size. This also includes the text for labels and charts, graphs, and table content. I realize that it can cause challenges, especially with some forms of documentation. But while the resolution for technology is better and better every day, the person who's reading your document may have a great deal of difficulty expanding the content themselves to zoom in. If the table or chart or graphic that you're working on is too large in scale to fit within your existing documentation because you've increased the font size to standard, you can include it within the appendix and link to that page in your document. You can also include larger sized pages within your document if they're included within a separate section. If you want to learn more about how to manage your sections and page sizes in your document, please review my tutorial on document breaks, and I'll go over how to use those features to make an accessible document. When it comes to document and section headings in a print document, rather than specific point sizes, you need to base them on a scale. And that scale depends on how many headings that you've included in your document, meaning that the more headings you have, the larger your heading 1 will be, and the smaller your heading 6 will be. Even so, the largest point size recommended for heading 1 should never exceed 22 points for a regular print document, and while the smallest heading, heading 6, should never have a smaller point size than 13 point. Basically, it should never be the same size as your body text because it has to be slightly visually distinctive from the rest of your content. This same principle needs to be followed for large print documents, which is the other print document category. Body text in a large print document is a minimum of 16 points. That also means that the text within charts, graphics, and tables also needs to be set at that minimum point size. Headings for large print documents as well are based on a similar scaling structure for regular print. The smallest heading for a large print document needs to be larger than your body text, which means it needs to be a minimum of 17 points. Whereas the largest heading, heading 1, needs to be at least 24 points in size for your document heading. I know this seems large, but the people who read your documents will really appreciate the considerations you've put forward. And I've had lots of questions on whether or not text can be tweaked a bit here and there to fit the design of your document better. The simple answer to this is generally, if it violates your standards, then no. There's a reason that these standard guidelines have been made for accessibility. These standards haven't been chosen arbitrarily. It's based on research and design user testing with the groups that these guidelines are used for. There are lots of creative ways that you can design your document with accessibility built in. It's when a design is made without accessibility in mind where complications between functionality and design tend to occur. For additional help, I've included the document guidelines for these topics in the description for Section 508 in the United States and the AODA guidelines for Canada on document accessibility. I've also added technical manual links for the topics for the WCAG 2.0. Please keep in mind that WCAG guidelines are built for web design and web content, and then they're adapted for digital content for print documents later. The last topic that I'll cover in this episode is the line spacing for text in your document. When I say that, I refer to the body text of a print document because headings and charts have their own cushioned borders based on the amount of white space that you choose to include. If you want to know more about how to use white space in your document, please take a look at my tutorial on document whitespace. Line spacing for print documents is pretty straightforward. The same principle will apply to the body text of both standard or regular print documents and large print, so we only need to go over it once. That is, all body text in any document should have a minimum of 1.5 line spacing. This line spacing is scaled based on the size of your body text, which is why one method works for both types. You can also use double spacing, but the key point here is that the minimum acceptable guideline specifies a minimum of 1.5. Now, you can change this setting in any document that you're working on by selecting the text that you want to change. Then access the Home tab in your ribbon and choose the Expand button on the Paragraph section of this tab. You can alternatively reach this by pressing Alt on your keyboard, H for the Home tab, and then PG for the Paragraph Properties window. Within the Paragraph Properties window, you can set paragraph line spacing by clicking on the drop-down menu and choosing 1.5 lines from the list. Or, you can press Tab until you reach the drop-down menu for paragraph line spacing, and then press the down arrow key on your keyboard until you reach 1.5 lines in the list. This method, unfortunately, will only change the text that you've selected in your document, so you will have to manually make changes to all of the text if you're going back to a previously constructed document, or if you're reviewing and editing someone else's work. If you want to include this setting as a default, you can add it to the body text style and have it pushed as a template to all your new documents. To do that, take a look at my tutorial on document styles. I'll go over how to make default setting changes in your Word software so that accessibility considerations are already in place for the majority of the work that you're doing. But for now, let's just apply the settings that we've changed in the Paragraph Properties window and then click OK. Once we have, we can see the changes affected to the text we've selected in our document. You'll have to go through and change all of your text manually with this method, but it's really meant for remediating, editing, and reviewing. If you want to make changes that'll help you from scratch, the Document Styles tutorial will help you do just that. That's everything that I have for this episode. I hope that you found it helpful, but if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section below, or you can email me directly using the email found in the video description. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.